Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our RSA Architecture and Urban Planning event number 2. So I'm Silvio Puru. I'm a chairman and planning director of Optimal Cities. I'm also joined by Jenny Anderson, CEO and founder of the Really Regenerative Center. And today we'll discuss about shaping the future regeneratively. And this is going to be an interactive session. So have your phones ready. If you're online, you might need to scan some QR codes. If you're here, you might still need to scan some QR codes, but feel free to interact with us as well during and after the event. Now, what is the plan for today's event is I'll talk a bit about the RSA group. Then we'll have an exciting interactive session by Jenny Anderson. Then some Q&A. We'll prioritize the online ones so they can engage first, and then we'll move for Q&A here. And after that, I will talk a bit about a digital campfire we're putting together to share stories. And then the next steps will be to have a coffee, tea, and chat here at the RSA, and also to discuss how we can make this group evolve even further. If you have any question in the audience, I'll please ask you to raise your hand first, and then we'll pass that box to you to ask your question. So the RSA, as probably some of you know, is a 270-year organization with over 31,000 fellows around the world. And it had multiple initiatives. It's not only about arts, it's also about manufacturers and commerce. Architecture and Urban Planning Group is one of the groups at the RSA. There are other groups such as Space, Responsible AI Network, sustainability, prosperous places, and so forth. So there are multiple ways to engage with the RSA and RSA initiatives. Now let's start with a small icebreaker. Who recognizes this place? No hands. Next clue. All right. Where exactly in Chicago? Have you been there before?
Is that not the Beaux-Arts exposition of around about 1900?
Exactly. So that's from 1893, if I'm correct. It had also electricity, which was quite exciting. So this is what I like to call the first example of virtual city, even if with haptic feedback, even if it was actually real. But it's not a city that you can live in because it's just plaster facades and metal frameworks. But it was a way for people to kind of share what an ideal place or city or design looks like. However, this, I think, is also a good example that the form alone doesn't make a city. The people make a place. So there are multiple ways to improve, regenerate, design places. And it's not only about by creating the infrastructure, but also creating the communities and linking people, health, and environments together. And that leads to our main core pillars of the group. And that's healthy, humanized, and harmonized. The reason we selected those is we want places to be, first of all, when you go to a city, you pay more rent, you pay more for services, you should expect to be healthier. Same with humanized. We want designs to be in a way that we don't feel we are part of a data center or a factory. So we want them to be in a human scale. And harmonized, we need to ensure we can coexist not only with economic activities, but also with the environment. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Jenny Anderson for her interactive session.
Thank you, Silvio. Hello, everyone. Hello, folks on Zoom. Are we? There we are. Okay. Right. I have to do two things, talk and click at the same time. Walking and chewing gum is not my forte together. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to be regenerative and what the implications are for the built environment. But what is deeply regenerative is about life. And one of life's most core and strongest principles is that it is relational. So we're going to start today with a little interactive exercise of 5 minutes. Folks online, they will help you into breakout groups shortly, just for 5 minutes. Folks here, find somebody that you don't know very well. And we're just going to, for 5 minutes, 2.5 minutes each, explore these two questions. What was it that brought you here today? What is your deepest hope for the future? So don't introduce yourself. Don't do the normal I am, I work for. Go straight in, dive into the questions, and have an opportunity to connect at a deeper level, listening for 2.5 minutes to each other on these questions, and then we'll begin the session. I'm hoping somebody has a timer. If we can open the breakout rooms for Zoom now, and be brave. Find somebody that you don't know, have a conversation together, and we're going to reconvene in 5 minutes. Okay. Hello. We are back in the room. Hopefully, I can tell everybody is having some important and valuable conversations. Zoom room, I hope you're back with us and that you also had some valuable, useful conversations. So how did that feel to dive into? How was that different for you to just dive into a conversation about your deepest hopes and fears? Yeah. Okay, I can see a few smiles, a little bit of nervous, twitchy, slight anxiety going on in the room here. What is regenerative is deeply relational. And I want to try to touch on some of the practicalities of what is regenerative for the built environment and for planning. But I also want to touch on some of the things that are really meaningful. But I'm going to start with a little bit of not such good news. So where are we as a species at the moment? We're at a very, very pivotal moment in our relationship to this planet and to life. We could describe this as a once in 400-year leap that we need to make to a new paradigm that we describe as the regenerative paradigm, although of itself it's as old as our planet. It is a leap that we need to make in how we relate to each other, how we relate to the life support systems around us. And it is a really important one for us to take. Why is it important? A little bit of context. Some of you may be familiar with the Stockholm Resilience Centre planetary boundaries. They are a representation of how far the human economic and cultural systems have pushed our life support systems, air, water, soil, out of kilter. And these studies have been done successively from 2009 up to 2023 was the most recent series, where we have moved really quickly from 7 boundaries assessed, 3 crossed, to 9 boundaries assessed and 6 crossed. That means the life support systems on which we are dependent are creaking at the seams. And it means we have to think radically differently about the future and how we design human economic and cultural systems in the future. A little bit of context for architecture and planning. The last 2 years I was part of, or really Regenerative was part of an EU-funded programme in the new European Bauhaus programme that some of you may have heard of, called Desire. And part of Desire, a paper was produced by a wonderful organisation, again, that you may know, called Dark Matter Labs, that actually looked at some of the critical data around the built environment. And if we look at the built environment across Europe, and whether we are politically included or not, that kind of includes us, from a lens of carbon budgeting, and just look at the built environment, the whole of the EU carbon budget for the built environment, for a 50% chance, not change, of hitting 1.5 degrees is 6 gigatons. And at the current level of building, the whole of the EU will exceed that by 2026. That's next year. What that actually means in terms of data, if we look at the average carbon output of the average new house build, would mean that the whole of Europe could only build 145,000 new houses a year. How many are we actually aiming for in the UK alone? So that is a suggestion that something radical in our thinking needs to take place. So what is the source of that impact? Resources are the main driver of emissions, of pollution, and of climate change. So the construction sector is responsible for over 50% of the EU's extracted materials, 40% of energy, and 27% of greenhouse gases. Circularity as a system in Europe is around 7.8% of materials across Europe, and it's declining. It's not accelerating. Our energy use is accelerating. We are certainly overall using more renewable energy, but the human economic system, as it grows, always uses more energy. So we are not actually making up a deficit. What should we be thinking about in terms of energy and the built environment context? If we look at the renewable energy sector alone, 3 billion tonnes of extracted materials might be required for the EU's green energy project. That is going to have an enormous impact on lots of different peoples around the world, lots of ecological systems, in order to bring the green economy strategy into being. We are already seeing resource wars start to destabilize the geopolitical environment. So that's some of the context to rethink our built environment strategies. It's not just a change, it's not just a tweak. It is a radical redesign and reinvention of how we approach the built environment. So what does it mean to be regenerative in that context? So what is regenerative is realigning our human economic and cultural systems to living systems principles, the principles that have kept life going on Earth for 3.8 billion years. What might that mean? It might mean that what life does is focus on evolution and future potential. It doesn't fix problems. We're obsessed with problem solving. Problem solving attracts funding, it's heroic, but what is regenerative works with future potential. So every architectural project, every planning application, questions that we should be asking ourselves are, what is the potential to create more life here? More human well-being, more ecological life, rather than what are the problems that this is trying to solve? That's just one example. I'm deeply concerned to keep to time here because we did a really bad job last time. So I'm racing through. Hang on to your questions. What else might being regenerative mean? One way that we shape a story or a narrative around what is regenerative is healing the story of separation. That has existed for many hundreds, if not thousands of years. The separation between humans and natures, where we think we have dominion over nature and can extract at will. The separation between humans and humans, which plays out in any development that is built. There are always executive homes, there is always social housing. One has priority over the other. Profit has priority over purpose. It's also the story of separation between the way in which we think, the way in which we have been developed to think analytically, to prioritize and value our problem solving, our analytical skills over our intuitive, nature-based, holistic and connected selves. Another way of looking at it is this is the journey. The journey is away from devolution is probably not the right word. Degeneration is a better word. Devolution is politically in our minds at the moment because we are pulling apart local government systems, which is really important in planning. But towards evolution, to move to restorative systems, towards regenerative systems. It's trite to say it, but it is a journey of learning, of iterating, of experimenting, and developing. So what might it mean for the built environment? I would describe it as radical dematerialization of the built environment. It means really accelerating circularity, reusability, disassembly, and creating perhaps regional networks of recycling, regional networks of biomaterials experimentation, really looking at on a regional and place-based basis how we can transform the construction materials environment. We need to think about investing in and creating what we describe as centers for life, places of experimentation where we can look at creating a whole new series of materials that can be used within the built environment. I have some stories to share with you in a short space of time. Full resource utilization. Why don't we reinvent, reuse existing stock? Because the investment system is not designed to prioritize it. So we have to find a way to do that. And to support all of that, we need a growth in the shift towards regenerative mindsets, a reconnection to those living systems, to nature, so that we start to prioritize future generations' potential and possibility of living on a planet that stays at least under 2 degrees warming. What might it mean for planning? I was recently with the South Downs National Park and invited to give a talk there to all of their planners. It's stopping and really rethinking what is the purpose of planning? How can we, even within a national legal context, think about planning as having some more noble purpose than ticking boxes and filling in forms? Many planners, I'm not a planner and I'm not an architect, that I speak to are really concerned, kind people who want to be able to have an impact on the future and on the places in which they work, and want to find ways that they can do that. When we think about how to do that, one of the things that we do, some of you may have heard of a wonderful woman called Danella Meadows, a fantastic systems thinker who gave us 12 different ways to intervene in systems. So I looked for leverage points in the planning system. Where might we start to even incrementally create change? We looked at the potential for national park management plans. That's a possibility. Local plans, supplementary planning documents, design review panels. Take a grab by all. I won't go through all of them. But the most important thing is to start looking for places that we can create change. Where else? In the application process even, how can we have more relational impact with the people who are making planning applications? How can we view every single planning application that's made as an opportunity to activate future potential, to ignite regeneration, revitalization, create more vitality in the places in which every single project is nested? What other opportunities might there be? How do we, local planning authorities or national parks, develop a purpose over and above why they exist to regenerate whole landscapes? How can they view every single architectural development or planning application or development from a holistic perspective and see how that each development could perhaps contribute to a new biomaterials-based economy? How could our developers perhaps create a tithing system where some of their profits are reinvested in innovative experiments that are place-based, in national or regional labs, where we look at we self-fund retrofitting and we self-fund innovative experiments, for example. Design review panels are another opportunity. How can we bring together, for example, community networks who would collaborate with and share their insights on the importance of their places to them, so that we work in partnership together with citizens, and citizens are given a voice in this process in a participatory, democratic way. These are all ideas about how we move from centralized authority as a governance model to more distributed and more bioregionally effective models. So here is an example of a project in France. Don't know if anyone is familiar with this, called Atelier Luma. I encourage everybody to visit. Atelier Luma was funded by a single philanthropic individual, Maya Hoffman, who made lots of money in Roche Pharmaceuticals. This is her place of birth. This was an enormously large landscape factory for producing railway engines, which became derelict. She purchased it and for 12 years has made it a center of experimentation in biomaterials within the Camargue. By doing that, she has created an entirely new revitalized economy in the Camargue itself, and shifted it from a relatively poor, ineffective economy to a thriving economy, but also created the space for every single building on this piece of land to be reconstructed regeneratively using regeneratively sourced materials, biomaterials. So it's a living, breathing experiment in what it takes to use materials and design and support young people in innovative projects within the built environment. I would eat every hat I own, and I actually don't own many hats, and my shoes and socks as well, to have something like that in the UK. What if we looked at architecture as healing? These are some of the projects from an architecture practice called Mass Design. Anybody know Mass? Over in Boston. They look at architecture as healing. So you can see some different projects there. The memorial at the top was to heal racism in the US. It was designed and created and constructed on a place in southern US, where many young Black people were lynched during their internal wars. These are a hospital in Rwanda and a health center in Burundi that are designed with living systems principles in mind. So people do not just come for treatment, they come for renewal and refresh their spirit, and they are supported economically as well. The architectural design, the flow of the architectural design is specifically experimentally done to look at not just the healing of the body, but also the healing of the spirit in some of those which were once war-torn areas. What if we approached architecture as holistic, looking at developments as how can it create transformation in the economy, in the culture, as well as provide housing? How many people are familiar with the Phoenix project in Lewis? One or two of you. This is a very amazing and ambitious project, which happens to be almost on my doorstep. I live in West Sussex, which is, I really genuinely believe, it will incorporate co-living and a transformative approach to how we design and build developments in the future. Whoops. So I spoke earlier about the new European Bauhaus program I was involved in. This is a city in Denmark called Kalundborg. Kalundborg is famous for the symbiosis, which you can kind of see up here, which is an industrial complex where Novozymes, Novo Nordisk is based. Almost all of the insulin in Europe is produced there. A lot of the enzymes that go to washing powders is produced there. But what we encountered when we started working on the project is a real story of separation playing out. The industrial complex is world famous, but it doesn't give any support to or interact with or nourish or support the community that lives in the small city of Kalundborg. People come out of Copenhagen to work there and they go away again. When we hosted some workshops in Kalundborg, what we found is that the people never actually mentioned the word nature, even though they are surrounded by some beautiful nature. When we walked through the town, there were no trees. There were no places for people to meet. There was no interaction. So we started a project with the Royal Danish Architecture School that was moving and creating its first ever campus outside of Copenhagen in Kalundborg, which the municipality was really keen on, a big, shiny new campus. But instead, we looked at all of the underutilized buildings in the center of the city, and we put the learning centers into those underutilized buildings. We housed students in the homes of local people. So we use that project to ask ourselves a question. How can the arrival of the Royal Danish Architecture School in Kalundborg play a role in healing the story of separation that is playing out here? We worked with a lot of local architects and a citizen group that formed, which called themselves the Phoenix Group, to experiment with what it might look like to have more arborescence, urban acupuncture of trees, of green spaces in the city of Kalundborg. It was slightly alarming. The first experiment was putting lots of trees in wooden wheelie bins and moving them around the city to see if it made a felt sense difference to the different places. And the regenerative person inside of me wanted to say, trees don't like living in wheelie bins. But it was a first experiment. And the important thing about it was it first got people thinking about connectivity to nature and to each other. And within a very short space of time, the industrial symbiosis had come in to see what was going on with the group of people that we convened, with the experiments that we were testing out, and started to fund community spaces in the city of Kalundborg. Civic Square is a very different type of place-based project that you may have heard of in Birmingham, run by the most wonderful Imandeep Kaur and her team. It is a community project in the heart of Birmingham, which has, after 10 years of struggle, finally managed to raise the funds to acquire the space in which to house this community, who are doing some amazing experiments with young people, looking at how to design and construct regenerative homes and places within the built environment in the future. I really encourage you to check it out. It's an amazing project. So a couple of resources for you before I finish off. So Really Regenerative, the community interest company that I run, does a number of different things. We host online learning journeys and in-person learning journeys in regenerative design. We are thinking about doing a special one from September for architecture and planning. So I will send some invitations to you out on that. We have recently produced a report for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation on enabling place-based community-led regeneration. All of these that you can find online. We also have a Sussex-based bioregional community of practice. Who's familiar with the term bioregioning? Yeah. So bioregioning is an approach to place, which is probably at the largest scale that life works. So life works in a interconnected series of bioregions. So when we look at a bioregion as a whole, we look at the relationship of that whole space to the life support systems in it, but also to the critical cities within it. In our case, Chichester is our critical city. And we are deeply looking at the history, the story of place of that region. And we know and understand from running our story of place process that that whole region has more than many thousands of years history in quality making, particularly within the built environment. We had a harbour, we made ships, but we only made 2 a year in medieval times, but they were small and highly prized for their quality. We made some of the highest quality ropes in the medieval era. In the Iron Age, our iron work was highly prized. Our flint is highly prized. We made some of the best bricks in the south of England over thousands of years. So what we're looking at in that context is, what is the future potential and possibility of our bioregion to be a place of experimentation for the future of the built environment? Okay, so I have rattled through those slides at speeds, and now I have a couple more questions for you in the next 5 minutes. Pick a question. Again, pick a different pair. Folks on Zoom, you will find yourself randomly paired up with someone different. So what would you have to change to have more agency in this field of work? I mentioned I spoke to a whole group of planners in the South Downs National Park, and one of the things that they said to us was, we don't feel like we have agency. We want to have more agency, but we don't know how to have more effect and more purpose. What's the future potential of the places that you work in that you could help to unlock in every architectural project, every development that you work on, every planning process that you're involved in? And what is the potential, no matter how small it feels, every single intervention that we can do, every relationship we have, every conversation that we have creates a field of energy that works towards a different future. So no matter how small, what's the first step that you could take in a different direction? So my magical timer called Sylvie is going to have another 5 minutes, and he'll keep the time for you to have, I hope, what will be another nourishing conversation. And thank you for your attention. And I'll look forward in 5 minutes to taking the most difficult questions you can possibly throw at me. Okay, we are back. 5 minutes flies. Okay, I'm going to do the Extinction Rebellion thing. Does anyone know that one? Hello. Hello. Okay, I hope you've had another nourishing conversation. Now it's time for some questions from Q&A. But just before we go into the Q&A, there are lots of books that you can read about regenerative design and development, but there aren't that many that are specific to the built environment. So I just want to give you 2 recommendations if you haven't come across them. Flourish by Sarah Chioka and Michael Paulin, who some of you may know of, is a really brilliant book that looks at some fantastic examples of the built environment. It's really, really clear to read. One of my personal favorites is called Low Tech by Julia Watson. It's a marvelous look at indigenous wisdom that has existed for a long time applied to the built environment. And it's an amazing source of ideas, information and knowledge about how indigenous peoples who have always lived regeneratively in right relationship to living systems do the built environment. So I deeply, strongly recommend that. Okay, I think we're ready for questions. Do we have any online questions? Oh, we can start with the room for Sylvie or for myself. You can have the beatbox.
Hello, how exciting. Thank you so much for the presentation. I had a question about, and this is something that I find tricky and tough, but in your work where you're talking about regenerative design and actually for it to be mutually beneficial, how do you navigate that sometimes when the power or the relationships aren't necessarily equal? Yes, I'll stop there.
Okay, really, really good question. I ask for hard questions. I wish I hadn't done that now. Um, I'll come back to sort of one of the first slides about the length of this journey that we are going on. So in many ways, I think about it as planting trees under whose shade I'll never sit. There are lots of things within any system that have to come together for transformative change to happen, not least of which is the existing dynamics of power and structures and policy and governance in our systems that don't lend themselves to this kind of work at this stage. So on the one hand, we're a bit like water through the cracks of a building. We're trying to find places and spaces where we can engage with policy and systems change and evolution. And on the other hand, we're working with individuals, with philanthropic funding. We're looking at innovative ways to raise different funding to create the experiments that we need that can show that a different way is possible. And it's a real difficult balance between the two. All of us butt up against power and structures and inequality and inequity in whether it's political, economic, social systems. I try to bring a mindset to it that is, what's my way around the rock in the road? How do I flow like water around it? Sometimes I can, sometimes we all can. Mostly it is really challenging. I was a long time ago married to a quantum physicist. And I kind of, some of it must have rubbed off. I was quite young. And he always said that every single act of regeneration creates a field in the quantum space. That might be a little bit too woo-woo, but that's kind of how it works. So every little conversation, every little opportunity for change, even, for example, with the South Downs National Park, who are absolutely genius and really working hard on this in their local plan, we're looking at how can we find ways to encourage architects, planners, developers to look at beyond things like net biodiversity gain and look at social purpose and look at the impact of whatever they're doing on the nested systems in which that project sits. So what's the effect of building a house on the whole of a village? What's the effect of building that house in a village on the whole of the region? What's the effect of choosing to build a development of 1,500 houses in an area that is protected for nature? How can it be done in such a way that it adds more than biodiversity net gain, that it adds vitalization to the social, the economic, the cultural system? It's about trying to find ways in to experiment with doing things differently. That doesn't really answer your question. I am old enough now to feel like I can allow myself to be a bit of a bulldozer when I encounter resistance. But again, going back to quantum science, resistance is the source of every single creative innovation we ever make in the world. So I actually kind of welcome it in because it is a way of adding to our creative thinking. So I actually don't mind it too much.
No, I really like the quantum physics reference because I think it actually sort of flips your perspective on it being limiting versus actually limitless. And your point about the tree.
And from problems to potential. We are conditioned to look at things as problems. So the first question I ask myself when I hear that voice sneak up into my head is, okay, what's the potential here? I don't want to focus on the problem. I want to look at what's the potential for more life, for more humanity, for more connection, for more resilience in each community. And it's literally like looking in a completely different direction. And I find it is a very, when you start to work with potential, huge amounts of energy come up in the room. Whereas kind of problems, it's like, oh yeah, well, we've got loads of those, but it doesn't engender, it doesn't help us think about something new. And that is what we have to do. We have to try to activate our innate creativity, which regretfully our education system has kind of squashed to a certain extent. And it's really hard to imagine something you've never seen, and that's almost what this work is. So yeah, I spend a lot of time in nature because that then I see things that I had not seen before happen, and it helps somehow.
Do we have any questions from online?
We have two online. First one from Marcia, two-parter. First off, the book that did not even flourish. Which was that one?
Oh, that book, Marcia. So I doubt you'll be able to see it. It's called Low Tech, Designed by Radical Indigenism by Julia Watson, an amazing woman based out of the East Coast of the US.
So, Marcia has written her own work, Building Inclusion, a practical guide to DI in architecture and the built environment.
Fantastic. I hope that we will find a way to share lots of different links to some of the projects that I've talked about with you. I think the RSA will help us with emails and sending information out. But you can reach me if we don't manage to do that. No? Oh, no, you can't reach me. It's a blank. Okay. So reallyregenerative.org. That's me on LinkedIn. That's my email address. That's my phone number. I don't mind calls, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, because alas, my little busy brain is almost always awake. Any other questions in the room?
We can take one more and then we can discuss more after.
Yeah.
Oh.
Bouncing
Where am I
blocks.
going? Over here.
Who's taking it? You taking it?
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I really enjoyed your lecture. Fantastic. And I agree with you. Positivity is definitely the way forward. And I love that metaphor too. The problem we face in this country at the moment, and how I'd be interested to see how you would tackle it, is that we've got a government who seems hell-bent on rolling out this 1.5 million homes and just trashing the countryside in the process. They're even rolling back just about every, environmental protection they can in plain sight, and it's very depressing to see when we think we're actually starting to get somewhere. So, and we talk about biodiversity net gain, but a developer can put up 1,500 houses and call it biodiversity net gain when they've concreted over an entire area of outstanding natural beauty. So how have we got to this point, and how can we, as mere mortals, infiltrate that system and that process to any meaningful degree, even in the next 50 years or 100 years?
My presentation is exactly about this.
Well, maybe I'll evade that really difficult question, and I'll get Sylvia to answer it. I would, for myself, I'm not a political animal, but there is, if I were looking at what is regenerative work, there might be 6 different fields of work, but one of them is having to find ways to engage with political and local authority, whatever the local authority system becomes, we have to find a way to do that. I would say the regenerative field in the UK is quite nascent. It's more developed in other parts of the world. I'm really deeply grateful for having been involved in the new European Bauhaus programme. I think we need more of those kind of programs in the UK that are funded by people like UKRI, Innovate UK, because I would describe our way through that political firestorm as I would describe it as what I call indirect work. So Trojan horse work, if you like, is if that's the way politics is going at the moment, I'll just look elsewhere and say, okay, how can we find ways to experiment and iterate and really show the art of what is possible? I think inquiry, not the kind of inquiries that are sort of government funded, but gathering communities together in place and inquiring into what is it that people want the future to be and to become. To organize learning journeys about their place so that they understand how the water does or doesn't flow through it, what the impact of water scarcity might be, what biodiversity. I don't know if any of you saw the article, I think it was in The Guardian yesterday or today, about how really seriously the whole insect population system across the globe is crashing. That is a real deep indicator of systemic collapse. I'm a girl from Brixton who believes in people power, I have to say, not in an antagonistic way, but in a way that we convene from place together and build the will and the capability and the agency to do things differently ourselves. I don't think it's an overnight job. It will last longer than I will. But I think in the human heart, possibly not in political systems, but they're humans too. In the human heart, there is a will to work differently. There is a will to design in alignment with nature. And the way to awaken that is, it might sound like a talking shop thing, but is first to bring your local communities together and ask and have difficult conversations and ask difficult questions about the future. And we're all incredibly stressed and under pressure to be doing to-do lists that are long as toilet rolls. The culture in which we live does not invite long, deep, qualitative conversation. But that is a way to build will, and we need will to create change. And it's kind of like people in the food system will say, well, the demand has to be there for us to change the way in which we produce food. That's partially true, but that's not the whole story. So there's a part of regenerative work that is working with political systems, working with local authority systems, working with developers to find ways in which they can do this work differently and better, but still do what it is they're set up to do, which is make profit. Not easy, but there are good developers out there. There's a developer called Thackham Homes in Sussex, which partners with a trust to ensure that every single development that they do has community systems built into it, has support for the community. Yeah, they tick boxes of biodiversity net gain, but it is about enabling people to have better relationships, more resilient communities. Then people can care. Right now, we don't have space to care enough to really demand that the built environment changes. So one of the ways we work is to try to create more spaces for conversation and care.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jenny. So to make a transition to the next part of the event is asking you a question. Have you changed the world today? Raise your hand if you changed the world today. I was expecting this. Oh, you. Wonderful. So one hand. But when I ask you, have you changed the world today? I'm not asking you if you changed the planet. How many of you brushed their teeth today? How many of you said to your loved ones that you love them or hugged them? How many of you walked or cycled or took the public transport here? Right. Imagine if you were not brushing your teeth. You were not saying I love you to the loved ones. You were not walking or cycling here. what is the ripple effect of that? Every single thing you do, every single day has a ripple effect. And the world you are impacting, it might not be the entire planet, but it can be your family, your community, your city. And those things matter and those things propagate. So every single one of you actually can have an impact that can be amplified. And when it's about changing the future, we need to think a bit about how we are actually planning. So how are we planning? Let's look a bit back in time. This is Imago Mundi. It's the first map, well, it's actually the oldest map we still have, is at the British Museum, showing not only Babylon, but how they thought about the place in relation to the world. So the place, when they were describing a place, were not describing the place as it is, but in relation with the external world. And that's quite important because these relationships of places are always changing. There's no such thing as a static place or a static object. Everything is in continuous flux. So in order to plan the future, we need to understand those changes and how they were understanding the changes before. And if a place was healthy, Romans were sending birds. And after a while, they were catching them back and checking their organs, if they're healthy. And if they're healthy, they thought that's actually a good place to establish a city or a settlement. Now we have less cruel ways to do that, from sacrificial rituals with multispectral satellites to monitor the impact of the environment, the biodiversity conditions, from divine omens to geospatial data and tools to verify the accuracy of our assumptions and also to validate our plans, and from animal organs to AI-driven GIS models. So using those predictive analytics, wonderful technology. And let's have a look of what is the interface of a planner right now. But wait, some of us are using also internet browsers, so it looks a bit more different. Right, so things are still very complicated. Now, what I've done with a great team of planners and technologies in the last years was developing what we like to call geospatial companions. They're using geospatial data from satellites, from planning regulations, and you are able to monitor, filter, and prioritize different interventions. So let's say you want to place more homes, but you want them to put them in a sustainable location, or you want to have biodiversity policies. You can prioritize those conditions. You can monitor the change. You can see were they actually effective by cross-referencing with population health, for instance. And that ranges from UK to US to Samoa and so forth. However, the problem is when you rely only on tools, you'll not have an accurate image. I like to use tools that I like to call split-second tools. So tools that you don't spend hours in front of a computer. You actually spend minutes to do that analysis work. Because what is the value? The value of a planner's work is not actually doing this, is actually being on site. So let's imagine the following scenario. You have 1.5 million homes targets. You really needs to release some land. So if you take the parametrical approach, you say, okay, let's look at land that is close to facilities, maybe land that has is not too green either. Maybe we can release some protected areas. Oh, actually, we have some previously developed land in this area. So because it was previously developed, we can release it. If we look on from a parameters point of view, that looks like a good site. But if we're looking historically, that is the place where the D-Day was planned, where 5,000 airmen and personnel from UK, US, and Canada were based. Even General Eisenhower and General Patton worked there. They had actually the headquarters to plan the D-Day. And even more, you can see still the plaque, and it says, through fraternity, we gained liberty. And we had like a really interesting, every single year, there is this tour of the D-Day, and some the sons and daughters of veterans are coming together, and they were telling stories about the place that they had many people coming in there. London was under bombardment from the Nazis, and the kids wanted chocolate. The adults wanted liberty. So for the next flights, they were bringing chocolate. So they said the Allies brought us chocolate and liberty. And that now is the home of other life forms than humans. There is no, there are a few hints of the former Camp David, but now is full of bunnies, deers, owls. So yeah, if you want to develop on this land, you need to go through me and my army of deers. So don't develop on that land. And that's the idea is when you do the analysis on paper or on geospatial formats, you need to consider that there are always stories behind pixels. I was asked to come in Barcelona to review some projects in urban and architecture innovation, and I was looking. They have housing pressures there as well, and I was looking for viable locations to kind of build housing. And there was this area here close to a lot of facilities. It's scored in the green, so I said, oh, let's go on site and see the location. And from the exterior, it looks like it's like this wall with graffiti. It's like, okay, it's cute, but housing is more important. But when I got in, there was this, a community-led, bottom-up garden. And there were many people here with their kids, with their pets, a small cafe. And this place, which is not very large, was essential for the life of the community. So let's scratch that side from the housing as well. There are a lot of lessons we can learn when spending more time on sites and looking how people live in other conditions. For instance, in McMurdo in Antarctica, they're literally living next to a volcano, an active volcano, Mount Erebus, to do their research. And every single resource they have, from food to water to electricity and even spaces they live and work in, are very scarce and very valuable. So there are a lot of lessons to be learned from there. Even more in space, imagine that a bottle of water is $10,000. So when you're thinking about reusability, when you're thinking about making the best of what you have, there's a lot of inspirations of how people are living. And actually, I like to say that in space, we actually have a village. Now the population is over 10, probably. Hopefully, it will grow soon. And yes, if you have the question, we do have an RSA space group. We can talk about that later. Now, what we created was, based on this idea, an interactive map of those stories. I like to call it a digital campfire. Stories about placemaking. It's not a project showcase. It's not an advertisement. It's a collective map of those stories for all around the world to give the information, to give let's say, to show what is the process of planning, not the result of it necessarily, but the process of it. Because very often a lot of information about how we make cities, how we make homes is lost in regulatory frameworks, is lost in shiny PDFs and websites, but the real nature, the battling the trenches to make a place is lost very often. And in the Apollo program, when they sent people on the moon, a lot of the techniques actually were not recorded. And I think the risk of planning and designing regenerative places, the risk is all that knowledge, all those experience might be lost because people expect that you go through a linear, predictable process. So there are millions of people and millions of stories every single day. And now you can finally decide what role you can play with those tools and with those communities that are emerging, including our community as well. So linking to the theme of agency, the idea of this group is to have the connections, the tools, the capabilities, and the knowledge so you can look the future in the eye and say, I can shape you. So I included a QR code if you want to contribute to those stories. I also link that to the Circle group and on LinkedIn and hopefully via the RSA email list. So you can submit your stories, and if approved, it will be in a very nice interactive map. You can use this as a way for you to create conversations and partnerships with other stakeholders and actors. So I'll let you scan the QR code. And how many of you are fellows? Wonderful. If you're not a fellow, and if you want to become one, I'll include some links after this one. Still waiting for people to scan it. So if you're already a fellow, you can join our architecture and planning group by scanning the QR code or just going to Circle in the architecture and urban planning space. If you're not a fellow, you feel free to join, or you can come to me or our colleagues and ask him more details about how you can join the RSA. Thank you very much, and looking forward to see you next time.